The central question of my talk is are there social changes that can lead to happier and more sustainable lives? Some ecologists answer negatively. According to them, to achieve sustainability entails that current generations should sacrifice their standard of living and therefore their happiness. Their claim is that there is a trade off between happiness and sustainability. I would check whether this answer is correct by analyzing cities. Cities are crucial for the answer because most people in the world live in cities and most pollution and resource consumption comes from cities. So my question is it possible to organize cities in such a way to live more happily and sustainably? Is the recipe for happy cities different from the recipe for sustainable cities? Let's compare the features of sustainable and happy cities to check whether they look alike. How is a sustainable city made? Let's focus on Copenhagen, the capital of Denmark, a famous example of ambitious sustainability goals. Copenhagen wants to reach carbon neutrality within 2025, and it is rapidly approaching to this target. How? Their strategy have two pillars. First, to reduce the need for urban mobility. Copenhagen is filling up with all neighborhoods with points of interest, such as post offices, sports facilities, bars, restaurants, libraries, shops, green spaces, etc. Green spaces, in particular, play a critical role in this strategy. Copenhagen has been filled with pocket gardens. You can see one in the picture. They are typically very small, and they are created in unused urban spaces, such as street corners, small spaces between houses, and small neighborhood squares. And the second pillar is the revolution in mobility. The use of cars has been severely restricted. Mobility works on bike or public transportation. Public transportation has become very efficient. Bikes have been promoted in all ways. The city has a huge infrastructure for bikes. It's plenty of parkings. There are biking bridges. You can see one in the picture. In this way, Copenhagen is greatly cutting carbon emissions, rapidly approaching to carbon neutrality. Let's now see the features of a happy city. Cities have been invented 5,000 years ago, and their function has always been the aggregation of people, building relationships. Relationships were created in urban common spaces. Then cars arrived a few decades ago, and the common space lost quality and lost its function to create relationships. Cars are dangerous for pedestrians and they are invasive. They invade lungs, ears, sidewalks, beyond the streets. The decline of the urban social fabric that followed from car domination is a big issue for happiness. Happiness studies show that social relationships are critical to happiness. The situation harms everyone, but in particular the youngsters and the elderly. For their reduced mobility, their society hangs on the availability of a social fabric just outside their home door, but cars hamper this possibility. Over the past decades, there has been a revolution in the life of young and old people. Until a few decades ago, they lived in a dense network of relationships. Now, 80% of under 18 years old and 40% of over 65 report feeling lonely. Children used to spend most of their free time together and outdoors. Now, for the first time in history, children's time is spent primarily at home in front of a screen rather than among other children. Car domination contributed to this change, shaping a lonely life for kids. All in all, the literature on these topics suggests that shifting from a car-based urban mobility to a mobility based on bikes, public transport, and sharing would substantially improve the quality of common space, resulting in increased sociability and happiness. Another crucial role for happiness is played by green spaces. Dozens of studies emphasize the benefits of green space. It promotes mental health and physical health, sociability, recovery from mental fatigue and stress, and even students' academic performance. It is another widely studied topic. More walkable and less car-dominated neighborhoods promote social connections and happiness. Walkable neighborhoods are densely populated and mixed use. Mixed use means multiple functions: residential, commercial, recreational, work. This translates into more interest points, which in turn means more people in the streets and more social connections. What does not work are the typical American suburbs, where population density is low, people are car dependent, and there are only houses. Summarizing, the features of a happy city include high residential density, mixed use, pedestrian areas, green space, sports centers, walkability, and a revolution in mobility based on public transport, cycling, and sharing. Another advantage of the kind of city I'm suggesting is that it would reduce spending on healthcare. Epidemiological studies show that poor relationships and unhappiness are major risk factors for physical and mental health. This has implications for prevention, which should take place outside the healthcare systems. Improving happiness and relationships substantially reduce morbidity and thus spending on healthcare. This prevention may be particularly effective when targeting the elderly, the big burden on healthcare spending. You see here the impact the impact of social isolation on the elderly's health is to increase the risk of most typical diseases of the old age. Numbers in these epidemiological studies are big. Good relationships substantially reduce the risk of diseases, and we expect a substantial reduction in spending on healthcare as well. So let's go to my take-home message. There is no trade-off between happiness and sustainability, at least as far as cities are concerned. The reason is that the features of a happy city and of a sustainable city overlap almost perfectly. Urban planning for sociability, happiness, and sustainability of both the environment and healthcare spending can be effective and low cost. The key is reforming the space and the use of space and mobility. Many thanks for your attention.